Hi everybody, it's Chef P. I have something else for you today. So I put together a video on how to debone chicken breasts, and in my shopping I was able to find tenderloin, not at a great price, but I thought it might be interesting to show you how to prepare a tenderloin. Okay, so this is the full beef tenderloin. This is the muscle that's on the inside of the rib cage. So if you look at a cow, you see the back, and you have sort of a loin on the back. It's not that loin, it's on the opposite side of the bones on the inside. And that muscle hardly gets any use, so that's why it's so tender. So you might hear people say filet mignon, and filet mignon is not the cut, but filet mignon is just a filet with bacon wrapped around it. Mignon just means cute. So by wrapping that bacon around, they help to keep it moist. Filet mignon should always be eaten rare, in my opinion, or medium rare. It's really, from a chef's point of view, cooking that well done is just a real crime. But if you're the well done type of person, then try it medium well maybe sometime, and then maybe move back to medium, and then you'll eventually get to the point where, wow, this is a great cut of meat, and it's great when it's rare. So I'm just going to take you through that. I'm going to take the wrapping off. I'm just going to dry off some of the blood. Sometimes there's blood that sort of goes in there, and that'll be unpretty. So I'll do that, and then I'll show you how to prepare this and cut the filet mignon steaks. Okay, so isolation and home cooking brings us back to the house. I typically don't use a very large cutting board at home. The large cutting boards that I have, I use to display and stuff. So I usually don't use them for my meat cutting. This size meat I typically don't deal with on a regular basis, but it was a good deal, so I thought I'd pick it up and maybe freeze some stuff. So I just want to show you the structure of the tenderloin. So if you look at it this way, you'll see that there's a general sort of a tube sort of here, and then there's a little piece on here. So it actually looks sort of like a little, I don't know how to describe that shape. But there's sort of, it's a straight line, and then there's a little head on it like that. There's also something called the chain, and this chain runs all the way down too, and it's part of the muscle that keeps it attached to the inside of the cow's body. So I'm going to sort of take you through the process on how we clean this up. I know it looks a little gross for some people right now, but we're going to work through it. This fat that's on here, we typically call suet, and it's this is the good fat. This is the stuff that melts down and becomes very good. I'm actually going to keep all these scraps so that I can make a beef stock. So I would encourage you to do the same. Okay, so first thing I typically do is I take this membrane off, and I want you to keep something in mind. When they slaughter these cows, potentially this whole outside is covered in E. coli. Okay, and that's true of most steaks, just because of the way that they're processed so quickly. Sometimes the outsides can become a little contaminated with things. So that's why it's so important for the outside of meat to be cooked well. And it's also this whole muscle kind of pieces of meat are also the reason why we don't have to cook it that far. But if we grind that meat and that outside gets mixed up with the inside, then that's where we have to cook everything to make sure that any E. coli that is there will be cooked away. So I've pulled off some of this membrane on the top, okay? And so actually there's a little bit more. You see, you can get your fingers right under that, okay? And you're going to expose something that we call silver skin, okay? And this silver skin here, you can see it here, doesn't cook off well, and it actually shrinks. It'll never cook off nice and tender. Okay, so we want to make sure that we don't have that on there. So I'm just exposing that. I'm taking some of that membrane off, and if I needed a little knife to move it around and get it off, not a problem. And I'm saving all this for my stock. Okay, then I'm going to flip it over on its side, and I'm going to separate the chain. And I can do most of that with my fingers. Okay, and if I have any troubles, then what I'll do is I'll just get the knife in there just to sort of help it along. Okay, but you should be able to tear that right up. This meat here makes great things like if you want to do a quick sort of a quick stir fry with beef, you could do that. This would work really well for kebabs as well. That would work really nice, where you don't have to cook it too much. So I always keep it. Chefs always typically keep it in restaurants. They keep it for themselves and make decent meals out of it for themselves and for their staff, because it's really good. But it's hard to serve as its own piece, like a steak or something like that. So I'm gonna take that chain off. Okay, we're gonna deal with that chain in a few minutes. So I'm just gonna put that over here. So now that chain's off. I'm gonna take off some of this excess stuff here, and you'll see that on the head or the top you've got sort of two sections there. It almost looks like a fish from here, doesn't it? And then I'm going to separate this part here. I'm going to take those pieces of fat out. This is that good suet. Okay, and I'm just using the tip of the knife. I'm just sort of running it, just touching it through so that I can pull it off. All right, I'm going to do that. I'm going to continue to pull some of that off. Like that. All right, then I'm going to flip it over to the other side this way. And what you'll see is this is the side that actually has the ribs running on it. So it's on the inside of the cow, but the ribs are sort of here. So you'll see that when you get it, there's actually some little bits of the rib cartilage that may still be there. So you'll want to cut that off. All right, so just very, very simply, I just sort of take it off like this. Okay, like that. And all those little pieces will come off. And you'll see it pretty clear where the ribs were. Okay, same thing over here. If I find that I've got a little too much, I can just cut that off. And I use the weight of the meat to help me too. So if I pull up on this, as I cut through, you'll see the weight of the meat will help you. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit here. So if I have a little piece here, I'll just run the knife through and cut that piece off. Okay, and I can see that because it has a little bit of silver skin on it. And you'll be able to get through it. So any other little pieces there, I'll take that off like that. Okay, and then sometimes what I'll do is just sort of run this through my knife this way, and that'll gather up some of that nastier stuff. Take that off. There we go, take that off. There we go. And I think we're almost there, some of the ends here. There we go. We're in pretty good shape. Now, some people like to take all the fat off, and you can totally do that. And if you want to, you can do it with your fingers. Okay, and if you have any extra little chunks that sort of come off like this piece here, then I'll save that to put with my chain, which I can, put together in a nice little stir fry. All right, so we're looking pretty good here. So we're going to start off now. So basically what you've got here is you've got the tenderloin in the center here, and you've got sort of two parts on the top. We're going to try to keep those as intact as we can because they're going to form part of our steaks. All right, now we're going to clean out some of the silver skin. And the way that we do that, and I hope I can get this on video for you, is you start off with the silver skin, and I sort of poke through, and I try to stay as close as I can to the top. And I just run, sometimes it'll come all together. I run it up, but I'm actually going against it. So I'm putting my knife up against it, and I'm just sort of running it down the length of the silver skin. And I can put that in my stock and do the same over here. Like that. Okay. So you can see where that silver skin's coming off now. Same thing. Continue here. Like that. And this is why the boning knife is so important. And it's got a sharp little tip. Come through and then just take that off. Now, if you keep that on there, what will end up happening is as you cook it, it'll shrink. So it'll sort of twist the steak in a weird shape, and it won't look very good. And if you have to chew it, it's very chewy. So it's not nice. And if somebody's paying, some restaurants will charge you $50 for that steak, if you're paying $50 for the steak and you have to chew on it, your customer won't be very happy. So take that through, we continue the process. Okay, and I'm continuing up here too, so I've still got some left up here. So I'm going to do that. Now, if you're really lucky, you can get a nice big piece, and it just sort of works really nice this way, like that. Take this piece here as well. Now, some of that silver skin you're going to have to try to get out of the little crevice here, but you don't want to separate those two pieces. Okay, so you can kind of see that it's here. So I'm going to sort of work it almost like a little V, like that. All right, now I can poke through, and then like that. I still have a couple pieces here, so I'm going to get those out of there. Same thing up in here. Get rid of that. There we go. Got a little bit extra fat here, so we'll get rid of that. Like that. Now we're looking in pretty good shape here. Pretty good shape. A couple other little stragglers here. There we go. And I'm going to check the rest of it. Most of your silver skin will be concentrated to that area that we just did, but there are some pieces on the opposite side. And you'll see it on this little part on the head of it. Needs to be trimmed off as well. So, oh, it looks like I still have a little bit of membrane here too. So I'll take that membrane out. And then, see the silver skin? So I'll take that. So this type of meat would be a dry heat cooking method. Okay, so barbecues and things like that, things that you'd eat it rare and it would still be very, very tender. Not every piece of meat is like that. Okay, some of them require more moist heat. So some of the tougher cuts can be delicious and sometimes have a lot more flavor than something like this. I think I've told you guys in class, I can teach anybody in 5 minutes how to cook a decent steak, but it takes a little bit more talent to be able to cook a cheap piece of meat. Okay, so an expensive piece of meat, anybody can learn really, really fast how to cook it and make it taste great and be tender and the whole bit. But it really is a skill to grab a piece of meat that is not expensive at all and try to make it a delicious meal. And those cuts tend to have a lot more flavor. They tend to be very, very nice. Okay, so this is pretty much it. I'm going to take off some more of this fat here. Okay, and I'm saving that. I'm going to save that for my stock. Very good. All right, we're in pretty good shape here. And we're almost ready to start cutting it into steaks. Now, you could also, this top section here, there's a very famous, amazing dish, Chateaubriand. Chateaubriand. I could cut this into a little roast like this. I would cook the whole roast, and in classic French restaurants, this would be served right at the table, sliced and served to the guests right there. So Chateaubriand, haven't had in years. It's hard to get in a decent restaurant these days, but they're nice. I'm actually just going to go with these filet steaks. So take a little bit more of that off. So we've got a pretty clean piece of meat now. See that? Very nice. So I'm going to start to get this plate over here. I can put my steaks on there. And over time in a restaurant, you learn to be able to cut things to a right size. Typically, you'll get a a filet that is either 8 ounces, 10 ounces. Some places will even do a 12 ounce. I like to stick with the 8 to 10, and you just sort of learn over time. But that's a steak right there. Okay, so I'm going to put those here. And you'll see, depending on the thickness, this is a bigger steak, so this is probably a good 10 ounce filet here. I'm going to continue the process. Look at that, that's another tenner. That's it, very nice. All right, I'm going to continue. Now this piece here, I've got a little piece coming off. I'm going to add that to my chain, okay, which I can use. The meat on this is so tender and so good. All right. There we go. Now see, this is a really big one, and it's because some of the main body of the, okay, so sort of the center cut of the filet is here, and it had a little bit of the head still attached. So I've got two. I could cut these two and make, you know, a steak for a child and then one for their, okay, or if somebody doesn't like that much meat, you could give them the small one like that. So continue on. Okay, I'm going to take this off. I'm going to add this to my pile for the with the chain. And now this is where you start to recognize the filet steaks. Okay, so straight circles like this. And if you want to make it a filet mignon, you wrap it in bacon. All right, and then grill it. So high, dry heat. And you just cook sort of the outside. And best, of course, medium rare would be the best way to eat that. And I'm just going to keep cutting these steaks. Now, I'm obviously not making steaks for 30 people here today, so I'm going to be cryovacking those, putting them in the freezer, and then we'll be eating these over the next few months. So we'll continue on. Yeah, these are beautiful. These are very nice. And I could have made them a little bit smaller if I wanted to, but I think I'm going to keep them at this stage, and they're gorgeous. Ooh, everything's getting in the way. You guys can't see me do the end here. There we go. So as I get further down, I'm going to make them a little bit longer, or thicker, right? Because I want the weight to be roughly the same. Okay, so this one's a little bit thicker than, say, this one over here, but the amount of meat's roughly the same. So I want to show you how to make a butterfly as well, and you'll see this, we call it a butterfly steak. So obviously in here, if I cut these steaks, they're too little. So what I do is I cut it wider, twice the thickness that I want it. Then I'm going to make an incision, hopefully you see that, right through the center like this, but I'm not going to cut it all the way through. And I'm just going to fold it, and that's why they call it a butterfly. Okay, now in a restaurant, if you're paying $50 for a filet mignon dinner and you get a butterflied steak, you'd be pretty upset. Okay, so this is typically not what you do unless you serve it as a butterfly steak. So same thing with this little guy right here. I'm going to do the same. This is going to be a little smaller butterfly. I'm going to do that. And there's that one. All right, so now with the chain, what I'm going to do with the chain, okay, these pieces are all really beautiful. This is the pieces that I had left over from the head and from the bottom. Those are ready to go, but my chain needs some help. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off some of this extra fat and connective tissue. And I'm just going to take that off like that. This one, I kind of like a little bit of that fat because when I saute this, that fat's going to render. Okay, so when you see that sort of, it's kind of thicker fat, and that fat is really good flavor. If I see any silver skin, then I'll try to take some of that off. Okay, but this cut is actually pretty forgiving. Okay, so I see that there's some silver skin here. I'm going to take that off. Actually, there's quite a bit here. Let's see if I can get right under it. like that. I'll take a little bit of that fat off. Yeah, and we're in pretty good shape here. There we go. A little more here. Yeah, we're in really good shape. Okay, just get rid of some of that last little pieces of silver skin. All right, we're in pretty good shape. So I'm just going to check here. There might be some little pieces of the bit where it goes next to the rib cage, and you might have a little bit of silver skin there. So I'm going to take that part off. And again, when I use the blade of the knife, I can actually just kind of scrape it, and I'll get some of that extra fat that I don't want there off of it. Like that. Like that. And what I typically do with the chain is I just cut it into pieces, and then I'll use them to either do some kebabs or, again, a stir fry of some kind. Okay, this would probably work well even for a Philly cheesesteak that you wanted to do real quick sandwich. All right, so basically what I do here is I just cut them into pieces, okay, like that. Now, this is way better than stewing beef, and it has a really good flavor as well, but doesn't require as much cooking as as stewing beef does. Okay, so I'm taking all that, and I'm going to add these pieces too, and I'm going to mark it that it's not stewing beef so that I can use it for decent things. There we go. All right, take a little bit of that off. Okay, and just a word before we go, of course, is that just realize that most of the meat that we get these days is potentially covered in E. coli on the outside. Okay, and as long as you cook the outside of that steak and kill off that stuff, you're safe. You're safe to go. But if it's ground, it needs to be cooked through all the way. Okay, so I'm going to wrap all this up, cryovac it, label it, and put it in my freezer. And thanks for hanging with me. See you.